a little while, and I said, oh, we learned to think like that too, you know. Matter of fact, I was in our mission candidate school, and way up there on the top row, as I was saying this, a guy let out this loud sneeze, and somebody else shouted, he blew his mind. And so, I guess you can blow your mind in more than one way. But anyway, here they're standing there thinking. They said, I thought, well, I said, oh, maybe, I said 5, 6 moons ago. And then the strangest thing happened. There started a commotion and they started to talk, and they started to get louder, and they got excited, and they got angry. And I heard snatches of it, and they said, Tuan, get in there, go in your house, and get on your knees, tell your God you want the garden back. I said, oh, I don't want the garden back. I've been so happy not owning it. Have you ever been happy not owning something? Oh, I can sleep again now. My worries are gone. My anger is gone. My health is improving. My nervous system is improving. Hey, I'm so happy not to own it. And don't envy the rich man. He's got more worries than you'll ever have. But friends, I said, no, I don't want. We want you to own the garden. I said, why? He says, you're the cause of all the problem. You tell your God you made a mistake, because you did. You tell him you made a mistake and get it back. I said, I didn't make a mistake. I feel it's the best thing I've ever done. They said, oh, Tuan, but you did make a mistake. I said, why are you saying this? Well, you're the cause of all the problems. They'd had powwows, they'd had talks, they'd offered witchcraft to the demons. You know why? Because nothing was going right in the village. After I gave my garden to God, everything started to go wrong for them because they were touching God's pineapples, and he can take good care of them. The rain wouldn't fall, the gardens wouldn't grow, they'd let the fish hook in the river, nothing would come up. They'd hunt and they'd never get any pork. We hadn't gotten pork for months. They said our women aren't getting pregnant, there's no babies being born, we're going to be outnumbered by the enemy tribes. They said everything is wrong to them. They'd been making sacrifices to the demons. They've been having talks. Who has wronged them? Who has turned them off? What is wrong? They couldn't find a problem. And all of a sudden they stand in front of my house. And they said, missionary, it's you. You're the cause of the trouble. Get in there and get the garden back. And I said, I don't want the garden back. Well, we want you to own the garden. We never gave you permission to give it to your God. He is not to own any property around here. And I said, hey, why don't you quit stealing his pineapples? Ah, Tuan, you're so dumb that won't work. I said, why not? They said, well, you know what it was? They're chronic thieves. They couldn't stop stealing any more than some of us here can stop worrying. And we should be able to stop, because we have the way of escape, right? 1 Corinthians 10:13, when you're tempted, you resist Satan, right? Resist the devil, he'll flee from you. We should be able to overcome our chronic besetting sins. They could not, because they were deceived. They were controlled by Satan. They had never faced temptation and not yielded. And they said, you know, when they get near the garden, they smell the pineapples, you know. Satan make them feel hungry, right? He does that to some of us too. We get near the fridge and we get hungry. But Satan controlled them totally, you see. And they said, Tuan, that won't work. You get the garden back. Oh, I didn't know what to do. I said, I don't want to own a garden. Oh, they come at me. They got all the spears, you know. Now, at this point, they're showing me the spears, all the heads of the spears with the ugly ostrich bird claws on the top, sharp. They start, you see them all start to move. They start pulling the bows back to see if they still work, you know. They start playing with the bowstrings, boing, 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 you know, till you hear it. You know, you really get the point, don't you? You don't want to get the point. And they're getting angry. Tuan, get in there. Pray. And my wife says to me, I thought you said this was going to be funny. It wasn't funny anymore. I did some quick praying, and God gave me a name, Haimo. That's very sharp native. I said, Haimo, where are you? I want to talk to you. And Haimo comes out of the crowd. And he stood there and laughs at me. I said, Haimo, why are you laughing? He says, Tuan, you can't be a Christian and own the garden at the same time. And I said, Haimo, you're right. Now, what was he saying? This verse that had troubled me. Unless you forsake all that you have, you can't be my disciple. Discipleship means lordship. You can be born again and fight for your rights. But you can't be his disciple, because if you're his disciple, then he's your Lord, then he's Lord of all. And only lordship, when he's your Lord, that's a Christianity that witnesses to others. That's a Christianity that shows. The others see, and they say, you can't be a Christian and own a garden. You'll be an angry white man again. And I said, Jaime, you tell them. And they were getting angry. And you know what they said at this point? They said, Tuan, we give you the privilege of living with us. Oh, brother. You know, they thought I'd gone all over the world and found the nicest people anywhere and lived with. That's what they thought that. I said, Jaime, you try to talk to him. And I step out of the way, you know. And they're looking at him. He says, quiet, all you people. He says, hasn't this Tuan been a nice Tuan to live with since he's become a Christian? But if we make him take the garden back again, he'll be an angry white man again, a miserable fella. Why don't we let him own the garden? And they said, Jaime, you're crazy. If he owns the garden, if his God owns the garden, well, then we'll die. Jaime, you're going to starve too. And they're all getting angry at him now. He says, hey, just a minute. He says, look, if you can't leave those pineapples alone, walk the other path. You can get to the river the other way. You don't have to go by his house here. You know what he was saying, the equivalent he was saying? Like we say, if you've got a problem with alcohol, don't go by the tavern. That's what he's saying. He says, you won't smell them, you won't even know they're there. Let his God own them. Then he can be a Christian. I said to Jaime, I said, I really want to be a Christian, Jaime. I've so enjoyed being a Christian. Let me be a Christian. And he says, he really wants to be a Christian. Let's let him be a Christian. They start to rub their nose again. What are we going to do with Tuan, you know? And I'm just waiting this thing out. And finally one guy says, Tuan, does your God see in the dark? I said, yes, he does. And that was the first realization that they had, that God knew everything and could see in the dark. And most sin is carried on in the dark. And they realized that God could see in the dark. And that really worked for us. They start to understand God. And another guy says, God, Tuan, your God's big, isn't he? I said, oh, yes, he's big. He controls the rain. He controls whether your wife gets pregnant. He controls whether you catch fish, whether you shoot pigs. He controls whether your child gets sick. Everything. You can't even breathe without God's help. You'd die if it wasn't for God's sustaining power in your life. Oh, God is big. They said, I'm not going to steal pineapples anymore. And about half of the crowd quit stealing because they're afraid of God. And you know, when you have a fear of God, that's when they got converted. The other half still stole all the pineapples, so I still wasn't getting any. But they brought them to my store, and I bought them from them. And no, that isn't in a pineapple story book, because Bill didn't want to put in there, you know, he didn't want to propagate buying stolen goods. And you can understand that, and he was right. But I thought, well, God's given them to them, so maybe I can buy them. But the strangest thing happened now. Out of the group of people that weren't stealing anymore, and they came to me and they said, we're not stealing anymore, Tuan. Your God's too big. I said, good for you. I said, now you ought to be a Christian. I was starting to win a church, and these people became converted. And I started to train these preacher boys. And one morning, they woke me up early, and they said, Tuan, come out here. And I came out, and I said, what's this? And they had all these pineapples laid on the front porch. And they said, Tuan, take them in the house. It's not right for our people to steal your pineapples. Take them in the house. I said, what do you mean by this? They said, Tuan, we can't watch them anymore. We're going to the jungle for a while. And so I said, what do you mean? You know what they'd been doing? The preacher boys had taken turns watching the pineapples at night. Snakes, mosquitoes, and everything. While I was sleeping, and I didn't know it, without pay, they're guarding the pineapples because it wasn't right that their people would steal my pineapples. I couldn't believe this. God sure can take good care of his property, can't he? And he delivers them to him. I said, look, they're God's, they're not mine. And I gave each man his portion and took a portion myself. And we all thanked the Lord together. And I was amazed. I said, God, you deliver them to my front door. I don't even walk in the garden anymore. I don't even know if they're growing. If the garden needed weeded, I first thought, well, if God owns the garden, he can weed his own garden, right? And, that's not the way you do it. Friends, I become the manager. I'm the steward. He owns it. I'm working for him. If the garden needs weeded, I send him in to weed it, you see. And, God did marvelous. You know what happened to the thieves? They kept stealing. Well, once it went this way with the pineapples, I gave my banana trees to God too. Oh, friends, the way God can grow bananas. We had to prop up the trees. The the bunches were so big, it's soft stem tree, and they would fall over, and the papaya and the coconuts, and we gave the whole thing to God. And really, we were exporting fruit now. The MEF plane would come, and we'd load it up, and I'd send it to other missionaries, and they'd say, where'd you get this beautiful fruit? How is it that you got assigned to the paradise of the South Coast? You know, I mean, the Garden of Eden. What did you do to deserve this? It wasn't a paradise until I gave my fruit trees to God and everything. And they say, how do you keep your people from stealing them? And I could share with them, give your possessions to God. God takes good care of his property. And I could share with them this whole principle of yielding your rights and surrendering your rights. But friends, an amazing thing happened at this point. The thieves were still stealing them. And the preacher boys caught on. Inevitably, when somebody stole, something would happen in his house. Somebody get sick, house would burn, his chickens would die, something would happen. God would have the pressure on him. And the preacher boys said, have you been stealing the 2-ounce fruit? And they'd say, yeah. He'd say, oh, that's why. His God's on you. He's big. They'd walk. And all these thieves started to get afraid every time it happened. You know what we found on the front porch? We found bananas and pineapples and stuff brought back overnight. The curse had gone on. The pressure was on. And they brought it back hoping that it would be lifted. You see. And now we're finding everything. Everything they ever stole from us we found on our front porch. That's how God got it back to us. You see. And it was unreal. And friends, the pressure was on to the place where they didn't want to steal anymore. They're afraid. And they said, and you know, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't even get guys to weed the garden anymore. They didn't want to get in God's garden unless they die, you see. And now I'm going on vacation. I had to be away 3 weeks. And I said, now look, when I'm gone, take the fruit. Use it. It's yours. I can't eat it. It's all, I turn it over to you. As long as I'm gone, it's all yours to take. Don't let it rot on the trees. Don't let it fall off the trees. I'd come back 3 weeks later, and the fruit was rotting under the trees, and it was rotting on the trees. I said, why didn't your people eat it? You need it so much. Tuhan, you saying it is one thing, but your God, he's something else. He's big. You see? And I couldn't believe it. Now I couldn't get rid of it. Hey, let God have control of your things. You'll never lack. I was exporting it. If the planes didn't come, I'd carry it to the village. Here, eat these bananas. Some guys wouldn't even eat them till I took a bite first, and then they'd eat the rest of it. But this kind of thing, I couldn't believe it. God sure can take good care of his property. And you know, this is the way it is all the way around this circle. Notice here, the altar in the center, all these areas of our lives. You know, I learned the area of possessions and gave everything. They stole the silverware, and finally we gave that to God. And then they stole the shirts, and finally, I remember one day a guy stood there with a special nose bone, my ballpoint pen right there in his nose. There he stood. And I pulled that thing right out of his nose. And you know, the day I did that, God got through to me, and God must have been laughing at me or crying over me. See, I given all the stuff outside to God, and now I'm fighting over the silverware, and they stealing everything from inside the house. The houseboy, you know, dropped the silverware on the floor, kick it through a crack. Baby brother's under the house catching it. It was so fast we'd never caught him. And then I finally caught on to that and stopped the cracks in the floor. Now they're smuggling it out in a garbage pail, and everything went out there. And they stole everything from, and finally we realized we better give the stuff inside the house to God too, you see. And I never give anything to God until I lose it. Are you, any of you like me? Are there any Dutch people here? Jim Elliot said, he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. And you know, but the opposite is true. He is a fool who keeps fighting and struggling for that which he cannot keep and ruins his health. Isn't that true? And friends, I finally my wife and I gave the silverware and the stuff and the clothing to God. I remember when I was down to the last shirt, and I saw that red plaid shirt going on the line, and I said, oh God, I'm going to lose that shirt. And I quick gave it away. I said, God, you're going to lose your shirt today, because I can't keep it any longer. And you know, that thing stayed on the line all day, and people didn't even see it. I asked them next day I was wearing, didn't you see my shirt? They said, no, we never saw it. It was unbelievable. And then how God supplied us with silverware, with shirts and stuff that were issues. We never lack in those things neither. God's got a real joke going with us. We got more silverware, more shirts than we can wear, we can use. And friends, it is that true. It's true with now. God finally realized, you know, the joy God had when he saw me graduate from grade 1 in his school. See, this is like his school. I didn't know there were 8 other more areas that God was going to see me through. If I'd known that, I would have quit, I think. Would have got discouraged. But I finally got all my possessions on, and I said, God, I don't own anything anymore. And the day I pulled that pin out of his nose, I said, God, the diaper pins and the pens and everything is yours. Inside and out, I don't own anything. That's the way I want to live. I can sleep good now. And then God put me in the 2nd grade. Now everybody's wasting my time. They had me fixing their harmonicas and fixing their shovels and their pots and wasted all my time. And I was so frustrated. I was afraid not to do it because I wouldn't be able to sleep at night because I did that once. Didn't fix it, and they were angry at me, and I had a lot of trouble, couldn't sleep. And God had them steal all my time. And then finally, again, my nerves were bad, and I gave that on the altar, and God blessed my time. You know what missionaries said that came visited us? You and your station are up to 10 years ahead of every other station on the southern swamplands. I couldn't believe that. You know what? I'd given my time to God and started fixing their junk with a happy heart and a rejoicing spirit, and they called me a Christian again. They said, you've become a Christian again. By the time I got around the circle, they were sure that you could lose your salvation. And but you know, because I myself, when I was struggling in this area of time, I thought I'm so backslidden. I was so happy back when I gave my possessions to God, and now I'm struggling again. I'm so backslidden. No, I'm not backsliding. I'm in grade 2, you see. And then as soon as I gave that to God, God put me in this reputation, and I almost got sent home from the mission field, and God let my reputation hit rock bottom, and then I gave it to God too. And then they put me on the field council, and I became leadership. You know, if you humble yourself, God exalts you. But I gave my reputation to God. It doesn't matter what missionaries think of me. It matters what God thinks of me. It doesn't matter what people think. It matters what God thinks. But in every area I fought, and then almost losing our children, dying out there in the jungle with no doctor and no help, and then waiting till they're almost dead, and then giving them to God. Oh, friends, why do we wait so long? Why don't we just let God take control of every area of our life? And as we've preached this, we've found in the area of health, when people surrender their right to be healthy, how many people get healed. It's just so beautiful, you know. When they say, all right, God, I'm going to quit fussing about this. I'm going to quit praying about this and pleading.